was going through the news today and I came across a couple of stories that talk about real estate and the market, and let's just check it out. Hey, thanks for stopping by. Dave Edwards, Treasure Valley Dave here, your great real estate agent by your side when it comes time to buy a home, sell a home, or even relocate here to the Treasure Valley. And buying a home might just be a little bit harder than it used to be, according to these news stories that I've been reading. So let's kind of get into that. So this is from the Washington Post. They say that skyrocketing rents and home prices may be pivotal in the 2024 election. Well, I imagine so. I remember Bill Clinton said, "It's the economy, stupid." So let's see what this has to say. Housing is largely a local issue, yet it is presenting a challenging and complex problem in Nevada, one of the states that they were focusing in this news story here. And they're saying that Biden has proposed specific policies of tens of billions of dollars to address the supply and cost, while Trump has mainly proposed reducing inflation. Well, that seems like a pretty good idea too, huh? As the incumbent, however, Biden could bear the brunt of the blame as affordability has grown worse in recent years. Maybe he can. The first 2 years of his administration, he did have a Democrat-controlled House and a Democrat-controlled Senate. So if he was going to get anything done, he had the golden opportunity, especially during his honeymoon period of being the president. He didn't do it because apparently he didn't want to do it. So back here in Clark County, which is in the Las Vegas area, rental prices have soared 36% during the COVID-19 pandemic. Prices started to come down slightly at the beginning of this year, but are still 30% higher than they were in January 2020. The reasons for high rents are numerous. Among them is low supply. And there are reasons for why there's low supply. So now here they're talking about swing states. Because remember, the premise of this is that cost of housing could play a role in the election this year. So it says that Biden touted his pandemic-era assistance that helped keep 80,000 people in their homes in the state of Nevada and kept millions of people from being evicted nationally. So what were some of those pandemic-era assistance? It was, one, throwing a lot of money at people, and two, telling people that they didn't have to pay their rent anymore, which, if you're the landlord that's making the mortgage payments, I'm not sure how all that works out. In Las Vegas, the housing supply was low leading up to the whole pandemic era. Construction came to a near halt. Building supplies, including lumber, became scarce, which led to inflation and elevated costs. Well, inflation did kick in shortly after Biden took office and started pumping the economy full of all these inflated dollars. To damp down on the inflation, the Federal Reserve increased interest rates. Also, this is interesting too. Make note of this. It's just kind of glossed over here. Wall Street-backed firms are also buying up single-family homes in Vegas, further straining the demand. So that's very true. Las Vegas is landlocked by federally owned land, preventing the city from spreading out. Also reducing the availability of land to build houses on. So that's just kind of a little side note there. The state did take advantage of $1 billion in federal funds from Biden's American Rescue Plan. The federal eviction moratorium, coupled with Biden's directed federal rental assistance, kept people in their home. So there we go, back with pumping the economy full of dollars that weren't earned into existence, but just right off the printing press. And the federal eviction moratorium, which is another way of saying, landlords, you're not going to get paid and you may end up losing, your house. I wonder who's going to buy that. Could it be one of them Wall Street boys? I'm thinking so. But now those federal funds from Santa Claus Biden are running out. Evictions have been on a steady incline and housing shortages persist. So how are the candidates responding? While housing is in large part a local and state issue, there is some room for the federal government to act. Well, I would guess so. Housing was not that big of an issue during, let's say, the Trump years. Interest rates were down, prices were down. We didn't have the material shortage and stuff like that we had during the pandemic. So I would say definitely because of the federal response to all that, especially since January 20th of 2021. It is a federal issue because it's the feds that got us into this mess. In part, Wall Street has some blame in that too, right? But Biden and Trump diverged greatly on how they would address this great problem. The Biden administration views the challenge in two ways: cost and supply. The United States has had a housing shortage for many years. Biden's $258 billion plan. Biden's plan is just that. It's a plan. It's not anything concrete. Apparently, he'd still need the support of Congress, and it looks like it's going to be housing tax credits for low-income Americans. Well, low-income Americans don't make all that much money to start with, so a tax credit just offsets the taxes you owe. Maybe you don't owe any, then where does that leave you? And then you don't get the money right away. You need it on the first of the month to pay the mortgage, to pay the rent. You're not going to get this. You're going to get part of it next April when you file, and then the rest of it the following April when you file again. So Trump said that he's proposing massive cuts to Housing and Urban Development's Department of Affordable Housing. Could it be that that cut of the program would actually help? I don't know. Sounds worthy of a debate though, huh? And I found some of the comments to this story were kind of educational as well. Said this article doesn't mention that home insurance is becoming a lot harder to obtain. Well, that's very true. Like if you're in California, certain parts of California, you just can't get it anymore. So that means you have to go with the state program, which costs a whole lot more. Another person said, developers don't want to build low-income and affordable housing because they can't make as much money. Well, I don't know. We're talking about maybe the greedy developers, but let's look back a little bit. They said that the Biden came out and said that renters don't have to pay their rent. And so if you're a developer who's going to be investing in homes to rent out, and you see the government's going to say, hey, renters, you don't have to pay your rent. Well, who's going to pay all the money? Who's going to pay the investors, the people that have the mortgages on these properties? I mean, on the one hand, the Bidens are saying we need more supply, and on the other hand, we're going to put you in grave risk because you don't know what we're going to do. We're just kind of funny like that. This person said they should ban private equity from buying and owning residential property. So maybe this guy's, really nailed it. This next person kind of follows up on that. They say that the small landlords, the one with maybe up to 3 properties at most, are the ones who most often treat their tenants as human beings and try harder to work with them so they can stay. They generally aren't the ones charging usurious late fees and kicking out their tenants after a month in order to get $100 more. So there you go. Do you want Blackstone? Do you want Wall Street? Or do you want mom and pop that you can actually talk with? You can dial a phone number and get a human. That's pretty wild. So then the next story, same place, Washington Post, same day. So it's just kind of like, it's a cosmic sign, wouldn't you say? What does it take to buy a house? Increasingly, it's help from mom and dad. Well, I think we've probably been seeing some of that, right? The share of young home buyers relying on older mortgage co-signers, not older mortgage, but older people, is as high as it's been in at least 30 years. It says by 2022, that number had spiked to 3.7% of all the deals have that older person co-signer helping them out. And Redfin says it's probably even picked up more in 2023. Continuing, meanwhile, the share of home buyers in their 20s, 30s, and early 40s receiving financial help for a down payment is also rising. Over 12% of the home buyers relied on down payment help from friends and family. The youngest buyers, ages 25 to 33, were the most likely to receive familial help, with nearly 1 in 4, that's 25%, receiving cash gifts or loans. The housing market is an incredibly unaffordable place right now, said the chief economist over at Redfin. People who are succeeding are coming in with a lot of cash and large down payments and often family support. Okay, well, who has a lot of cash? Oh, that's these asset companies that are coming in. Wall Street, as the previous article said. The trend of more younger home buyers who are more often first-timers seeking parental help to reach a middle-class milestone is just the latest sign of growing disparities between the younger generations and the older generations who had more opportunities over the past 20 years to lock in cheaper mortgages. So they're trying to get that little divisiveness going, one generation against the next. More parents are also getting involved in the home buying process and are considering joint purchases with the kids as a long-term family investment. So maybe, but wait till we get to the comments. You're going to hear what someone who actually went through that discovered. Also, the housing market has slowed precipitously since the Federal Reserve began raising interest rates 2 years ago. At the same time, home prices, which spiked during the pandemic, Biden years, remain high with a median at $420,800. The result is an increasingly unaffordable market that isn't likely to improve anytime soon. Goldman Sachs this month said it expects home values to rise another 4.3% in 2024. So everything is still inching up. Interest rates, house prices, supply, not so much. So now they're talking about the shift of parents getting involved with their kids and their home search, the home process. Some 44% of adults in their 20s and early 30s said they received financial help from their parents in the past year, most often for household expenses like groceries or utilities. Nearly 1 in 5 young adults said their parents have helped with rent or a mortgage payment in the past year. So this real estate agent here, Christina, she said it's definitely harder for younger people to buy right now. And the boomer generation has a lot more money than millennials or Gen Z has. But isn't that the way it's always been? Your parents up there in their age, they've worked all their lives, they've saved money, they've bought property, they've paid their mortgage for 30 years. Shouldn't they have more money than people just starting out? The increased reliance on parental help is widening the divide between those who can afford a house and those who can't. Parents who own homes are more likely to have the resources to help their adult children, reinforcing the crucial role of homeownership in lifting long-term wealth. So that's what we were just talking about. Parents, they bought the house, they did the right thing. They used to call it the American dream, and then they accumulated equity and wealth from doing that. It didn't happen overnight, and it took a really long time. And that is a great role model to teach the kids, is to get into a house and stay in there. Don't jump around. Make your payments. Build equity. The bigger problem is that young Americans who don't have family money are often shut out of home ownership. This contributes to wealth inequality and often prevents young people from gaining economic ground on their peers who come from more privileged backgrounds. So it sounds like the definition of a privileged background is a kid that has a family. That's privileged. In today's world, that's privilege. That's a bunch of Barbara Streisand, isn't it? That's the way it's supposed to be. The increasing role of parents in the housing market is a precursor to what economists say will be a massive generational transfer of wealth in the coming years, as older Americans leave behind trillions to their heirs. Some of that is already making its way into the housing market. Well, I guess it is making its way into the housing market via parents are co-signing, giving grants, giving gifts, loans to their kids to help them get into their house. And two, this story had some pretty good comments, and let's just take a quick look at those. Part of the problem is that this younger generation has some real lofty expectations of what their first home should be, and certainly wouldn't be happy starting with the little house that their parents first lived in. Well, yes, I'm quite sure that's the case. My parents lived in a little trailer. That was their first home, and you know what? It worked out fine. And here's another person that said, be careful when you co-sign. We co-signed for our oldest when they were first starting out, and here we are 13 years later. So now their credit is tied up. By being co-signers, we have been refused mortgages to refinance and to downsize. I'm retired, my wife is semi-retired. And we also can't co-sign for any of our other children. It felt good when we first co-signed. Now it's causing a rift in the family. So you're not just co-signing, you're betting your whole financial future on what your kid's going to do. And finally, we get down to this last comment. Hedge funds buying up homes is helping to strain the market because then the availability is artificially constrained to limit supply and keep prices high. Bingo. Nailed it right there. So RFK Jr. said recently, and you might have seen it on my earlier video, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of these, that by the end of this decade, which is only 5.5, 6 more years away, that the hedge funds are looking at owning 60% of all the single-family homes in the country. Do you think that could have an impact on housing prices, housing availability, supply, demand? Welcome to being a renter. Hope you like your landlord. Well, hey, thanks for stopping by and going through the latest news with me about what's going on in the housing. I had a great time. I hope you did too. And by golly, we're going to see you on the next video.
Hey, thanks for stopping in and learning more about real estate in Nampa, Idaho and the Treasure Valley. If you'd like to learn more, watch this video here next or binge on this playlist. When it comes time to sell a home, buy a home, or even relocate to the Treasure Valley, your Treasure Valley Dave team is your real estate expert by your side, helping you get home.